Hey YouTube, today I will be talking about how I became a flight attendant. Believe it or not, a lot of people ask me this question and they want answers. So I'm gonna tell you how I became a flight attendant. Okay, so I'm gonna get right into it. So I lived in St. Thomas, the US Virgin Islands for about 3.5 months and I was having a great time. And then my job that I was working for in St. Thomas transferred me to Alaska to work for them during Alaska's busy season. So once Alaska's busy season was over, my company moved me right back to St. Thomas, and I was working for the same company, but during St. Thomas's busy season, if that makes sense. If you're a little lost, I did make a video last week, and this is kind of a continuation of the story that I talked about last week, but it's definitely another huge component of how I became a flight attendant. So, back to the story. So, I moved back to St. Thomas. So now this is when it starts getting crazy. September 6, 2017 in St. Thomas, Hurricane Irma hit and basically wiped out a large part of the Caribbean. It demolished St. Thomas. It demolished Puerto Rico. It was crazy. Me and my roommate were stranded for about 2 weeks and finally got off the island, I would say September 19th, right before Hurricane Maria hit. So, you know, us not having jobs anymore, our home being destroyed, it was just like, wow, you know, to think January 2017, I moved down here and everything was going perfect. I ended up moving to Alaska, somewhere I never thought that I would ever go. Like, it was never even on my bucket list. And then I get moved back to St. Thomas. I'm having a great time. And then Mother Nature hits. And it hit like never before. That being said, I had to move back home and I had to stay with my parents. Now, remember in my last story, I told you that I basically gave up everything. I gave up my apartment, everything I kind of had to continue on this journey that I was on. And you know, now that Mother Nature hit and basically was like, take your ass home. So I had to do what she told me to do. I had to go home, and I was living back at home with my parents. And you know, that's not something that I wanted to do. It was something that I had to do, and you know, I had to start from scratch all over again. I had to find another job, and you know, the last thing I wanted to do was live in Delaware. Delaware is no shade, it's boring, it's nothing to do. So I was trying to find another job that could get me out of Delaware and keep me traveling. So I end up, you know, chatting with my friends in my group message. The good thing about, well, not the good thing about it, but you know, I had friends that were going through the same thing that I was going through, because we all were in St. Thomas, in Alaska, then back to St. Thomas, and then had to like up and leave and move back with our parents again, because we kind of didn't know where we were going to go, what we were going to do. So, you know, we end up giving each other information, and in Alaska, I met this guy who was the president of this jewelry store that was on the same block as mine. And we, you know, we were cool. We all end up hanging out. Alaska is not that big, especially in the place that we were in, Juneau. It's not that big, so everybody kind of knows everyone. And remember, you never know who can get you where just by being nice. Just like talking to people and being nice to people. So I end up meeting this guy or whatever. And, you know, I hit him up and I told him, hey, I don't have a job. I'm back at home with my parents, and I really don't want to stay in Delaware. I heard that you guys are hiring for the jewelry stores on Princess cruise ships. So, you know, I would definitely be interested in that. So he was just like, okay, yeah, no problem. Like, I already know your work ethic. You're a good worker. Like, just let me know when you want to start. So now I'm about to be working on a cruise ship. And, you know, I gave him all my paperwork, and I just said, before I tell you I want to do this, I'm going to have to make sure I exhaust every option that I have, that I get a job that I really want to do. And at that time, I didn't even know what that was. And then at that time, like, he already had given me the contract. It was two different types of contracts. It was a 6-month contract, so I had to be on a ship for 6 months. Or my next option was to be on a ship for a whole year. And I was like, I don't know, that ain't me. So that happened, and me and my friends end up going to LA because our jobs were still paying us, even though, you know, they were completely destroyed. You know, they had an obligation, I guess, to still pay us, which was very nice. But, you know, the situation that we're going through now, it seems like the U.S. that's another topic. But anyway, we end up going to LA, and I end up booking my flight on Spirit. Now, I didn't care what people had to say about Spirit. I didn't care what the media was saying about them. It was a cheap flight. And if you know me, I like cheap. So the flight leaving from Philly was about $50 going to LA. And then it was $70 going back from LA to Philly. So I was all for it. I was like, listen, I don't care. It's whatever. So we end up going to LA. We have a great time. Now, I meet this flight attendant once I get to Fort Lauderdale, because it was I had to take another plane from Fort Lauderdale to Philly. So I'm talking to her as we're walking, and she's like, "You look lost. Like, do you need help?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I need help." And you know, we laughing, kikiing, and I'm asking her about her job, and she's just like, "You know, you should be a flight attendant." So I'm like, "Really? Me?" I was like, "Thank you." And she's like, "Yeah, like, you have the personality, you look like one." And I was like, "Me?" I was like, "Thanks, sis." And then she was like, "Yeah." She's like, "I'm an ambassador for Spirit, and I go out and I recruit people, or I hire people." So I was like, "Oh, wow, that's what's up." So she was like, "Listen," she was like, "this job is a great job. You get great benefits." She was like, "If you want to work part-time, you'll be able to do that and work somewhere else. You get to commute into work. You don't have to live where you're based." So I'm listening to everything she's saying, and I'm like, this sounds interesting. So she's like, "All right, what's your name?" So I gave her my name. She gave me her name. And she was like, "All right, we're having an interview November 7th. Now, mind you, this was like the middle of October. She's like, "I need you to go on Spirit's website, go apply, and hopefully you should hear something back." She's like, "All I can do is give you the information. You just got to do the work now." So I'm like, "Okay, no problem." So I applied, and I would say about a week later, I got an invite to go to Spirit's face-to-face. Now, this wasn't something that I like dreamed about. This wasn't something that I looked up a bunch of information on. This was just me on a plane with a flight attendant. I looked lost, so we end up kikiing. She ended up taking me to my gate, and just a conversation. I met an ambassador of the company who thought I was great enough to go to a face-to-face interview. You know, talking to people and being nice can get you a long way. So I ended up getting the invite, and I kind of still was on some like, I don't know, like, if I want to do this. I end up looking up other, you know, airlines and finding out what their hiring process was like, because the airline that I got invited to, they weren't paying for my flight. So I kind of was like, is this a scam? Like, this was way too easy. So I end up thinking about it. I end up talking to my mother about it, and I'm just like, She's like, "Look, you ain't got a job. You might as well go. Have a little vacation by yourself." So I end up thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go. So I end up going to the interview, and I looked at it as a day vacation. I got there really early. I got there the day before. Of course, I did my research. I studied for the company. so that I would do good on my interview. And the next day, I wake up, I get dressed. I had on a black blazer. I had on a yellow tie. Spirit's colors are yellow and black. And yeah, so I ended up pulling up to the spot like 6 o'clock in the morning. I think the interview started at 8, but I went to get there 2 hours before. There was like 600 people. 600 people. And I'm like, yo, Spirit definitely invited everybody out for this interview. It looked like a concert. So I ended up getting there 2 hours early, thinking that I was going to be in the front of the line, but I was all the way back there. All the way back. So whatever, I'm meeting people on the line. We're talking. I met a couple of people who were already flight attendants. And to be honest with you, the way that I came into this situation, it was more like a whatever happens, happens. You know, I really had no expectations. As I started doing research on the company the day before, I was like, wow, Spirit don't seem that bad. You know what I'm saying? So I end up going through the whole process, and I was one of the people who got there really late. And you know, their whole motto was to have fun. You know, they wanted to hire people with energy, people who are energetic, people who were just young and fresh. I mean, like me, you know what I'm saying? So we end up all going into the auditorium. I was all the way in the back, and I kid you not, anybody who was at the same interview as me, they will tell you, or please leave a comment, they will tell you it was legit a party. Like, people were dirty whining, doing splits, and doing cartwheels. And I'm sitting there like, this is not an audition for Sean Paul and Vibe Cartel's next video. So after Spirit introduced themselves to us, they took us all in groups. I think by like, it was like 60 people in my group, and it was like 7 different groups. So it was like 60 people in my group, and they put us in a room, and they gave us instructions that we had to follow. You know, they're looking for people who follow instructions. So it was my turn. I had to get up, I had to pick up my card, I had to read my question, and I had to answer it. I was so nervous. Like, I am not a shy person, but when I know that I have to, let's say, read or answer a question in front of a group of people that I don't know, I get so nervous. And what's crazy is, being a flight attendant, that's what you have to do. You have to be able to take charge, and, you know, people follow your instructions. So I read my question, I answered my question. I think I did a good job. And then after that, they sat us down and they said, we'll be back up. You know, we'll be back in the room. And then they came back in the room and they said, all right, go outside. If you see your name on the list, that means you have made it to the next round. So I'm like, I'm definitely not going to make it to the next round. I was too nervous. I felt like my hands were going like this as I was reading. So I ended up looking, and my name was on the list. So I was like, okay, one step closer. Then after that, we had like a lunch break. So after our lunch break, we all lined up, and we got to speak to one recruiter and a flight attendant. So it was 2 people. So we were lined up by the wall, and then when it was your turn, you had to go in the room. So it was my turn. And, you know, they asked me situational questions. I had to read. I did a lift test. And actually, the recruiter who I got, when she had called my name out, she was like, where's Jamaica Queens at? Where's Jamaica Queens? So I'm looking, I'm like, I'm from Jamaica Queens. And then she was like, oh, okay, what's up? And I was like, oh, this is my sis. I know I'm going to get this job because she's from the Bronx. So we end up, you know, chatting. She ended up asking me situational questions, and I thought I did a good job at that. Then I actually got sent to the next round. The next round, I was in a room with like a bunch of other people. And because I had got there late, well, not late, I didn't get there super, super early at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I was one of the last people to get their answer. So they were coming in and they were calling people by name. They called like maybe 10 people at a time. And they were just like, you know, come outside. We'll talk to you out here. And then to me, that was the most, that made me the most nervous, because it was like, okay, are they calling these people because they want them to go to the next round? Or are they calling these people because they're sending them home? Like, I didn't know why I was still there. You know, that part got to me. So I got there at 6 a.m. and I end up leaving the interview at maybe like 10:30. And like I said, it was like 8 other people in the room at this point. And the recruiter came in and she was just like, hey guys, like, unfortunately, you know, we're gonna have to tell you that you got that job. So I was so happy that I got the job, because I thought she was gonna say, unfortunately, sorry we kept you here all day, but you gotta go home because you ain't get the job. So I ended up getting the job, and then all in that same day, I will say Spirit moved very, very fast. I did my fingerprints at that interview. I did my drug test at that interview. I did a lot of paperwork. Before you came to the interview, they told you, bring your high school or college diploma. Make sure you bring this. Make sure you bring that. So basically, I got processed in that day. You know, it took them like a week to get my drug test back, but I don't do drugs, so I knew I was going to pass that. And yeah, they sent me right off to training. You know, I'm forever grateful for meeting that ambassador on the plane that day. And, you know, her getting to know me, us, you know, talking, because without her, I don't think I would have ever became a flight attendant. And after I graduated training, I would say 3 months into me working, you know, all I can think about is, oh my God, I hope I'm going to bump into her today. I hope that I see her today so I can thank her, you know? Like I said, in the beginning, I was like, oh, I'll go, whatever. But I didn't know how much it was going to change my life, you know? The benefits, the free flying, traveling to places that I've never been to before, going to amazing cities for free, exploring, meeting a bunch of different flight attendants from all over the world, you know, like I needed to thank her. So I end up seeing her, and she was like 8 months pregnant, so she looked a little different. So I'm like, is this her? So I end up going up to her in the crew room, and I'm like, hey, do you remember me? And she kind of looked at me like, from where? Mind you, she was 8 months pregnant, and she looked bothered. She did not look like she wanted to be at work that day. So I ended up explaining to her the situation and the story, and she was like, oh my God, like, yes, I remember you. She's like, oh, I see you got the job. And I'm like, yeah, well, I probably wouldn't have went to the interview if it wasn't for you. So I just had to let her know that. So we end up taking each other's numbers down, and we keep in contact every once in a while. But yeah, that's how I became a flight attendant.